Okay, so this evening I'm going to show you what is required to operate the autopilot on the A320. So to do it properly, instead of just putting vectors in, to actually get it to follow a flight plan, we have to make a flight plan. So I could do this in a utility outside of Flight Simulator, but I'm going to use the tools in the box. So anybody could follow the same kind of idea. So I've come into the world map. I've already got the A320 Neo selected. We're going to zoom in, or we can use this and just search. So I've used Edwards in the past, for example. There's Edwards Air Force Base, that's where I want to take off from, but I don't want to start from there. I want to start, you can highlight the parking on the map. For example, I could start at ramp 78 as my departure point. So my plane will be sat cold and dark. If you choose a ramp, your plane will be cold and dark at that ramp. If you choose a runway, your plane will already be running. So that's where we're leaving from. Okay. So now we need to choose where we're flying to. So let's zoom out slightly. Palmdale, which is only a few miles away. So if I click on it, I can set that as the arrival airport. And it will give me my choice of runway that I want to land on. 25 kind of makes sense, that's going to be that kind of direction. So if you think of coming in from here, but we're not going to settle for just doing that. We're going to say in here, that was a direct GPS route. We're going to go for IFR, low altitude airway, so instrument flight rules. In other words, a flight plan. And you can see once you've chosen IFR, extra boxes appear. So we're going to do a departure straight out. We don't really care about the departure. We are going to, though, choose an approach. We want the ILS approach into Palmdale. So in other words, it's going to loop us round to come in on the ILS. So let's just go and check the weather. It's all on live, so whatever's happening now over there, live weather. All players can show live traffic. Weather and time can be live. That's interesting, because that's a bug in the game. Anyway, let's see what happens. It should recognise that it's now afternoon in America, it's not dark. Anyway, let's launch the simulator. It takes a little while to load on this computer because it's not massively underpowered, but it's not a supercomputer. So it will take it a few moments just to load in the scenery and put my aircraft on the ground. So the first thing we'll have to do is start the plane up. We can do it by hand, or we can do everything manually around the cockpit, which isn't too difficult. Or we can just press Control E and that will automatically fire up everything in the plane for us. So for the purposes of this demo and to shortcut this video, because we're not really concentrating on starting the plane up, we're just going to press Control E, which will do everything for us. Well, hopefully it should. Just waiting for Flight Sim to do its thing. So we've already chosen our flight plan, remember, so that should be programmed into the aircraft already, and we'll go and have a look at that. We'll have the names of the waypoints from that flight plan on it. So here we go, ready to fly. And we are set in the airbase, facing away from the runways, which is a bit unfortunate. That means we have to taxi round or do a pushback. Or we can just turn right, I think. So press Control and E and see what happens. Nothing. Let's try it again. There we go. I don't think the window had the focus. So I'm now waiting to see what this is going to do. Yeah, so one of the engines is coming up. One of them isn't. Now, why is that? Has Control E failed us? Oh no, there it comes. So it's doing one after another. So the engines are coming up to speed, so while it's doing that, let's have a look at this flight plan. If we zoom out and put this on nav mode so we can see, there is our flight plan. So we're going to fly round there, round there, round there, and back down there. For today, because the real aim here is to show the autopilot, so I'm going to get the autopilot to fly it for us. So it's important that we have the autopilot in what's called managed mode. So when you look on the knobs on the autopilot and the switches, they have engage manage mode. It's a bit misleading between the real thing and what we're doing here. It's the difference between pushing these, so pushing them into the dashboard, and pulling on them. So pushing them in would engage manage mode, and pulling them out would engage selected mode on the real thing. But obviously you can't easily do that in a two-dimensional interface. So they've just got pressing the top half and the bottom half of the buttons. So we don't even have to worry about setting the speed or the direction or anything. It knows it because of the flight plan. So the plane has warmed up and the engines are spooled up. So we can literally just go taxi out. We can set our altitude here. We're not even going to bother setting the speed. So when we engage auto throttle, we'll see what it wants to do, to see how much the simulator has done. Before we set off, actually, it'd be interesting to go and look on the MCDU and click on the nav radios. So yeah, it's already programmed runway 25 and the ILS frequency for it. If we look in the flight plan, we can see the steps. So these are the names of the waypoints. And it's seeing the height it wants to be at. So it's got vertical navigation instruction already built into it. We should be able to, yeah. So the way you think about these arrow buttons, if I press the up arrow, it moves everything on the screen up. So you can flip through the steps. So we take off from here, we go through a couple of waypoints. We pass through a waypoint called Amani, another one called Forda, and then we land on runway 25. Notice there are different heights assigned to these different waypoints. So we'll just see what happens. We'll see if we have to intervene at any point to correct it. So, first thing we would do is put the flaps to 2. Which you can either do on your joystick, or you can scroll over here and move the flaps lever. That's that done. So we will release the parking brake, which we can either do with a keyboard combination. We can look over here and we can just turn this. That is the parking brake. So I'm using the steering, so nose wheel steering. One of the things that's missing from the simulator is you should have independent control of the rudder and the nose wheel steering, and it just isn't in the simulator yet. So I'm going to roll down here and then turn round to the runway. Shouldn't take too long. I'm not sure if they've modelled in the game the minimum altitude for switching on the autopilot. We'll soon find that out, I guess. So basically I'm going to go down the runway, get the nose up, and then engage the autopilot almost immediately. Something that's worth remembering, I'll highlight it in a moment, is when you're operating the autopilot, you leave the throttle in predefined positions in its travel, which mean things to the aircraft. It'll make much more sense once I show you it. So I'm not going to bother with air traffic control either. onto the runway. There's no traffic around. Nobody comes out here apart from me, I think. Not in the game anyway. Okay. So we're ready to go. We've got flaps at 2. So, oh yeah, I was going to explain before we go anywhere about the throttle. So you see there are various markers. I better remove that trim that I just put on. There are various markers along the throttle's travel. So this notch, obviously during takeoff we will move the throttles all the way forwards, and that notch will correspond with TOGA, takeoff go around. Once we are climbing out, we will move it back to climb, and as long as the throttle is left on that CL marker, it means the automatic throttle can take over and can completely control the throttle, so we just leave it there. You'll see it happen. Okay, so get the mouse out of the way. It will be indicated in the corner of here, so manual throttles, TOGA. As soon as I pull it back, see, automatic throttle has started already. I didn't do that, it kicked in. I don't think that's very realistic, I don't think it should have done it. Listen to the throttles going mad. That's one of the bugs that people have been talking about. So I'm going to pull up the nose, gear up, and I'm pulling the throttle back gently, and it's now got to the point in that notch, and you can see it saying throttle climb. I'm also going to engage the autopilot. So this is managed speed mode, and the autopilot is following the flight plan. And look at the bugs that are involved here. It's going to put us in the ground. It's not following the vertical navigation settings, which is the main complaint people have been making about it. We are now going up again. I'm just going to let it do what it wants, within reason. So this is one of the serious bugs in the autopilot, is the vertical navigation is messed up. Lateral navigation seems to be fine, about turning around waypoints. So it's intercepting the path, because obviously we overshot the line when we took off from the runway, so it's coming back to the line. We can zoom in and out. We've got various different modes. Arc fits more on the screen. So the aircraft it's beginning to turn right already, look. You can see the artificial horizon is tipped over. So the speeds that are programmed into the flight plan, I haven't touched anything, I haven't even looked at what speed it was going to try to do. It's mad, isn't it? So what we'll do to save it from itself is put this back into selected airspeed mode, and we'll say we want you to do 220 knots, please. We'll take the flaps away, because otherwise we'll get a warning, because we'll be... So I didn't dare take the flaps away. The autopilot doesn't control the flaps, by the way. I didn't dare remove the flaps, but you even saw that on the runway. The automatic throttle kicked in, and it was trying to, well, I don't know what it was doing, had a mind of its own, and the altitude was messed up. So those two things are serious bugs. So as long as you stick to selected speed, or selected airspeed I should say, you'll be fine. Interesting, look, it's completely ignored the speed I chose. Selected. It should be following the speed I chose. The reason why could be, I can't see it because of the light in the cockpit. No, it's in speed mode, which means although we can't see it, but that is interesting. It's completely ignoring the automatic throttle speed. So there are serious bugs with this. You can see now it has started turning. It's cutting the corner to end up on this line. So it will probably cut the next corner as well, and the next one. So let's put some... Well, let's see what happens with the speed actually. Let's see how bad these bugs are. It's gone for managed altitude mode. So it's in managed altitude mode. So it's gone for 4,900 feet, which must have been in its flight plan. It hasn't done a great job of lining up. It turned too early to get onto this line. But it is obeying the selected speed now, which it didn't do earlier. It's a real shame. I guess a lot of these bugs will be ironed out in future updates. It just means you have to keep an eye on what it's trying to do, because it might get carried away and have a bit of a brain melt and do what it supposedly, well, what appears to be random things. Because you saw that earlier, we had it on automatic speed and it was showing speed here, and it went straight up through 350 knots. So we would be expecting it to cut the corner off, seeing as it did it on the previous one. So let's zoom out slightly so we see the corner coming. So is it going to turn, or is it going to turn late on this one? Which will be a bit confounding. I think it's going to. Oh no, here it goes. It's cutting the corner. But it's going to miss it, and it's going to overshoot the line. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So it it's bizarre. It turned too early for the first turn, it's turned too late for the second turn. I mean, obviously on a massive flight plan where you're travelling hundreds of miles, you wouldn't notice these things, because they're just course corrections. But when you've got a flight plan laid out in short distances like this, you can really see the inaccuracies. It's worth pointing out that I flew a plan earlier in the week with just using vectors, and it was absolutely fine. As long as you were using selected on all of the autopilot settings, it flew the route absolutely fine and obeyed the settings. It seems to be, if it's in managed mode, it doesn't obey the flight plan. Or it's very, how would you put it? It doesn't really understand how to keep to the flight plan. So now it's going to finish the previous leg. We can see this happening, by the way. If we... Although we can't see the names. Oh, we can, yeah. We're coming up to Omani. So we're on that leg. It's going to go to that one next. So we're just passing it, so it should move on. Be interesting to see at what point that changes its colour. There's several other things appear to have been quite random about it, so we should see it descend as well, because we're getting near the ILS. So I'm going to put the flaps down to 1. I'm going to reduce speed. So the autothrottles are working. You could hear the engine die then when I changed the speed down to 180. Because we're in line now for runway 25 at Palmdale. If I zoom out slightly, you can see there's the airport, so it will come into view on the 10-mile range at any time soon. So I'm a bit surprised the altitude isn't dropping. If we show ILS mode, we are below the glide slope. I'm going to turn on approach mode. So you can see the plane is corrected to the right to put us back on the centre line of the approach. And now it's turning left to correct it. You can see the artificial horizon is tilted. So the blue line on the outer track is the direction of the runway. The line on the, oh sorry, pink line. The line on the inner track is where we are in relation to the centre line of that path. So if the line was over to the right hand side, it means we're to the left of it. If it was to the left, we're to the right of it. So you can basically fishtail your way down to get exactly the right direction. So I'll put the gear out. You can now see we're descending. That's because it has picked up, the approach mode has picked up the glide slope, the vertical glide slope, the vertical component of the glide slope. So you can see it's following it down and the altitude is coming off. So we could turn the speed down now to 160 or 150. I'll go for 160. We can go for more flaps. Go for full flaps now. You can see we've got a 3-knot headwind, which is almost nothing. It's not worth worrying about. Outside, and you can see the runway coming. So we were doing this whole flight without even looking, and there's the runway. So what we're going to do on final approach, because I've let it land on mouse is a pain in the backside with this. I've let it land on automatic before, and it slams the plane into the ground quite hard. So I am going to take this off of auto throttle during the approach. So I'm just using the throttle now to keep it at about 160. I'm going to kill the autopilot when we get to about 100 feet or so off the ground.
500.
So we're down to 500. So I'll fly the last 100 feet or so. 400. Down to 150 knots.
300. 100.
Autopilot disengaged.
50. 40.
Engines
30,
back.
20. Retard. 5.
Yeah, I misjudged it a tiny bit. Put it back on the centre line because I was busy looking around the cockpit checking things. We actually drifted right slightly, but it wasn't anything too bad. But it's an interesting one. There's some serious bugs there with the vertical navigation and the automatic throttle. I think as soon as they fix those, it's actually going to be quite good fun. And it wasn't tracking the flight plan very accurately or predicting when it needed to make turns. But I think once all that's solved, it's actually going to be really good fun. So there you go. I'm just going to roll to a stop. I guess I ought to get off the active runway, but anyway, that's good enough for the end of this video. We demonstrated what we wanted to, which was where the bugs are in the managed autopilot.